There's a new study out from the University of Virginia. This is the Center on Politics there, run by a pretty competent academic, Larry Sabato. And it's an attempt to gauge public opinion in America, to measure the dividedness of America. Now, Sabato's goal is not to exacerbate the dividedness, but to look for areas of common ground. It's sort of a project aimed at seeing if Americans can, in fact, come together on certain key issues. But the latest study pushes very much in the opposite direction. It's a survey. And this is not the kind of one or two question survey that typically is done by media organizations. This is a kind of in-depth, multiple question survey aimed at gauging where exactly Americans not only differ, but to some degree come to blows. A survey of 1,001 Trump voters and 1,011 Biden voters. So it's about the same. This is not one of those rigged surveys we've come to expect. And the conclusion of it, kind of startling, and I'm going to quote Sabato himself, the divide between Trump and Biden voters is deep, wide, and dangerous. The scope is unprecedented, and it will not be easily fixed. So the question I want to look at is, well, first of all, what is this divide really about? And it turns out that neither side really wants to live in the other side's America. That is the sort of take-home conclusion of this survey, even though the survey goes on to emphasize, very much in keeping with the organization's mission, that there are areas of agreement. And the area of agreement they point to is the fact that Trump voters and Biden voters both believe in supporting infrastructure. Now, I think that this agreement here is more illusory than the authors of this survey think. Let's look at some of the items. They're talking about things like this. Do we want to have improvements in the electric grid and other parts of the power sector? Obviously, most people go, yeah. Do we want to modernize drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater systems? I mean, try to think of the mentality of someone who goes, no, I don't think so. Obviously, almost everyone's going to say yes. What about investing in the construction of roads and bridges and rail lines and ports? Well, again, in principle, who is against these things? Even if you go down to something that's a little bit more taken from the left's grab bag, making community college free, well, as an aspiration, of course, I support that. Who wouldn't want to have free education to kind of set you on the road to life? Of course, in a normal person's ordinary consideration, it's kind of like if, Debbie were to say to me, in fact, as she did say to me when we first moved into our new house in Texas, she's like, we got to buy a generator. And I'm like, well, how much is that? She's like, well, it's probably around $25,000 for a really nice one. I'm like, do we really need a generator? So this is like giving me a survey. Dinesh, what do you think of the idea of having a generator? Great idea. $25,000. Doesn't sound so good after all. So right here you get to the normal conflicts that people have when they have to measure the benefit of something with the cost. So simply to enlist people on behalf of the idea and then claim, wow, look, Americans don't really everybody wants a bridge. This is not exactly a highly sophisticated analysis. Now, the real rub of the survey was the question that asked, well, two of them really. One of them was, it seems like there's a willingness on both sides, on the left and on the right, to skirt around constitutional processes to get things done. A rather, I would say, alarming percentage of both Democrats and Republicans said things like, well, we should be able to get things done on our way, whatever the Constitution says. Not good. Or the idea that we can circumvent legislative processes to achieve our goals. Now, 52% of Trump voters say, you know what? It's time to secede. We've had enough of the other side. And so they either strongly agree or somewhat agree. But when you add the strongly and somewhat agrees on the Biden side, this is interesting, on the Democratic side, 41%. So adding them up, we've got 93% of Americans, think about this, saying that they strongly or somewhat agree that this national marriage is not working out. It may be time to say goodbye. All good things must come to an end. It was good while it lasted, but we don't really want to inhabit the kind of society that you're pushing for. Now, of course, all kinds of people have pointed out that a civil war is unlikely, and I agree. They've also pointed out that there is, because of history, the history of the Civil War and the aftermath of the Civil War, you can't get unilateral dissolution. One party can't say, well, you can in a divorce. You can have no-fault divorce. One party can walk out, even though two parties made the contract. But when it comes to secession, that's not going to work. You actually need the consent of both sides. And the question is, why would the other side allow it? If the left is in control of the reins of government as they are now, why wouldn't they want to force us to live in their America? Now, we're not exactly like them. Many of us would be like, we don't want to force you to live in our America. If you don't like the national anthem, don't sing it. Create your own alternative America or go your own way. But that doesn't seem to be their mentality. And so what is our remedy? Well, I want to suggest one. A remedy that might actually be a practical remedy in the years going forward. It's a remedy that comes out of the old days when actually divorces were very, very hard to get. And a lot of wives were sort of, they were very unhappy in their marriages, but they didn't know what to do. So here's what they did do. They basically made their husbands' lives miserable. they essentially made it almost unlivable because everything that the other guy wants to do, they'd go, no, I don't want to do that. I'm not going, or no. And so what you essentially do is you make ordinary life so onerous and so tedious and so painful that even though the other guy likes to rule over you and tell you what to do, at some point it becomes too exhausting, too unmanageable. And then even that guy who has the power shrugs his shoulders and goes, all right, let's go our separate ways.